Once in the darker forest, Lord Dragon withdrew from his possession of the serpent, unsure how the curse upon the serpent would affect him. As soon as he pulled free from the confinement of the creature, he stretched out his arms and wings and smiled wickedly. "Curse the king!" he shouted, glad that his own wings escaped judgment. He turned in the direction of the garden and shouted again, "I'll do more than strike against your heel. I will destroy this creation and devour the woman's offspring. Then we will see who rules the mountain." The serpent slithered off into the grass and never spoke another word. Lord Dragon thrust his wings downward and rose above the underbrush. Then he sped toward the deeper jungle, spewing angry, bitter insults as he coursed his way through the increasingly dense maze. It didn't take long for him to approach the horde. "He's back!" Deceptor, the dragon lookout, shouted from his position high up in the trees. "Lord Dragon returns!" another lookout said. "He's alone!" he announced. Moments later, the sounds of snorts and snarls echoed. Snap! Crack! Lord Dragon burst through the thick jungle canopy. Lord Dragon didn't care how much noise he made. His anger toward the king boiled inside of him, ready to explode. Legion stood and moved to welcome Lord Dragon, bowing at his approach. "Welcome back. We await your orders," he said. Lord Dragon shouted, "Call a dragon council now!" Legion turned and gave the order, which didn't need to pass through the chain of command, for all the dragons heard the command. The Dragon Lord landed in a small patch of ground, still seething from his encounter with the king. All around him, standing between trees and peering through thick jungle grasses, the dragon horde circled their lord in formation, much as they had once circled the king atop the mountain. "We have won our first battle," Lord Dragon reported. The dragon horde cheered, yet some of the craftier dragons noted Lord Dragon did not announce that the war was won. Lord Dragon told the story of the serpent, embellishing the details to impress the victory-starved forces. Then he reached the point where he tempted the wife of the man. An excited dragon interrupted. "So what did you think would happen when she reached for the fruit?" Lord Dragon answered the question. "I expected she would die, and with her any hope that this race of men would multiply." Several dragons gasped and together blurted in surprise, "She didn't die?" The puzzling news passed dragon to dragon, as every dragon down to the last repeated, "She didn't die." The horde grew silent again, stunned by the revelation, and looked to Lord Dragon to explain the apparent miscarriage of justice. Lord Dragon continued, "Worse still, the serpent took the fall for it all. The king cursed the serpent I possessed, knocking us both to the ground. The creature's magnificent wings and strong legs shriveled and were gone in an instant. My wings, as you can see, were unaffected. As for the man, instead of killing him and his wife, the king poured out his wrath upon two innocent beasts of the field. Then he stripped the fallen animals of their hides. With these skins, he clothed the man and woman and forgave their offenses." The horde stood silent, shocked and confused by the turn of events. Then one lone dragon shouted, "Unjust! The king could not exchange a lesser life for the man," he explained. "It is unjust." "Unjust?" another shouted as loud as he could. One by one, the dragons took up the accusation. "Unjust! Unjust!" they cried till all the dragons chanted, "Unjust! Unjust! Unjust!" "Quiet!" Lord Dragon yelled, silencing the snarling mad dragons with his booming voice. The chanting stopped. The dragons looked to their lord, who said, "It does not appear unjust, and I do not understand it myself. It does appear unjust, and I do understand it myself. But there is more to tell." After the curse, the king issued a prophecy that one day the serpent would bite at the heel of a child of man. Though he spoke to the serpent, I believe his word was directed toward me. I would bite at his heel, but the child, the king said, would crush my head. Gasps could be heard across the horde. Stunned by the revelation, the dragons pulled back from the circle in fear. Several took cover in the thick foliage. If a man-child could destroy the Dragon Lord, who could stand against mankind? Lord Dragon, sensing their fear, announced his plan. "Hear me," he called to the group. "Do not fear. No child of man will ever crush my head, for I will do far worse than bite against his heel. We will spread dragon seed across the lowlands. Man will rise up against man and destroy one another. In this way we will kill the child. Destroy the child and you destroy the promise. Destroy the promise and you destroy the king's perfection. And then the light of the mountain turns to shadow. We will rule over all." "We are an invincible army," he shouted. Then he led them in repeating his promise, chanting one word at a time. "We will rule over all." The Dragon Lord spread his wings, lifting his hands, and repeated, "We will rule over all." The dragons rose up from the shadows and joined in the chorus. "We will rule over all. We will rule over all," rang out through the forest. When at last the horde grew quiet, Lord Dragon gave each their instructions. Then he scattered his forces across the lowlands to practice their evil ways upon the lesser creatures of the earth. The dragons were spirit creatures whose bodies were most often invisible to the other animals of the land. They also had the ability to possess a lesser creature and speak through them. The stronger dragons, though normally unseen by humans, could show themselves for short periods of time, but without the light of heaven to strengthen them, the dragons were weak and had no physical power over man. Still, their dragon seed was a deadly poison and their greatest weapon. What follows next, dear reader, is a vital retelling of history. See the dragon's schemes. Understand his movement through the centuries, the millennia. Humans were always his target. It was then, and it is now. It started in the garden, but it continued through floods, prophets, and kings. Not only did he seek to drag away as many members of the human race as possible, but he knew there was a promised child coming. It brought a chill to his very bones. Someone who threatened the very heart of his seething rebellion. In the course of time, the man and his wife gave birth to a son. The dragons referred to him as the firstborn and bent all their evil forces against him. Soon the prideful roots he inherited from his father's seed began to grow. The dragon horde spewed fresh seed upon him that also found the fertile soil of his prideful heart. It too sprouted and sent down more roots. Then a second, far humbler child was born to man. He resisted prideful thoughts and fought against the dragon seed. He loved the stories of the king his father passed down. The garden of old seemed glorious, and he longed to walk side by side with the king as his father once did. His father didn't hide his failure and warned him of the deadly dragon seed. While the firstborn son ignored his father's counsel, the secondborn began to worship the king, offering sacrifices from the best of his flock. The dragons, fearing the younger son was the child of promise foretold in the prophecy, turned the heart of the firstborn against his younger brother. The older brother became so jealous that he murdered his younger brother in an angry rage. The dragons celebrated their victory that night, praising their Lord Dragon and his brilliant plan. But over time, the woman gave birth to many more children, and they in turn married and bore children of their own. Lord Dragon, in an effort to tempt the growing numbers of men, spread his forces thin across the land, sowing fresh dragon seed into their hearts wherever possible. With a goal to wipe any memory of the king from their minds, the Dragon Lord nearly succeeded. His evil infection spread until only one family remained loyal to the king. The king regretted his creation and could not overlook the evil rebellion of his creation any longer. For he saw that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart were only evil all the time. To bring judgment and purify the land of evil, the king opened the floodgates of the heavens and the great fountains of the earth, submerging the whole world below and destroying all life on the earth. The dragons celebrated as they watched the lowlands scoured by the flood. They laughed, giddy with victory, until they caught sight of a ship floating upon the waves, riding out the storm. The king did not allow his promise to die, for his word is always true. So there upon the waves, one loyal family rode out the storm of judgment brought by the king across the lowlands. The dragons cried foul and tried to get inside the vessel to spread their evil seed, but the doors were shut tight. They searched tirelessly for a weakness, but the king himself designed the vessel and sent guardians to watch over it. It took months for the water to recede. Once the skies turned blue, the dragons traveled to and fro across the lowlands, biding their time. Within days after the waters retreated and humans set foot upon the earth, the dragons were back, spreading their evil dragon seed. Once again, the hearts of even this loyal family became corrupted by the deadly seed. But with each generation, the king poured blessings and grace to preserve a remnant to carry forth the knowledge and hope of his promise. Their offspring multiplied and scattered for thousands of miles in every direction. Lord Dragon and his dragon horde spread themselves thin, convincing many that there never was a king at all. And while most forgot about the king, those that settled closest to the mountain kept his memory alive. Now and again, the king visited his people. At other times, he sent his guardians to watch over them. These interactions encouraged their faithful loyalty to the king. After 1,000 years and more of spreading dragon seed, the Dragon Lord came to realize there was only one path to victory. The number of people over the lowlands were once again too great. He must go after the child. The Lord Dragon listened to the king's prophets for information and clues. Their prophecies, meant to encourage the people of the land, contained information the ruler of the dragons intended to use to his advantage. Once Lord Dragon found the evidence he sought, he sent word through Legion to call a council of the dragon horde. After piecing together hidden clues extracted from a rebel scribe, he believed the promised child would soon be born in one of the cities nestled near the base of the mountain. As time passed, the lesser dragons did all they could to spread their evil seed among the lowland clans. They corrupted the poorest of men and the greatest of kings. Even the wisest king to ever live fell prey to the temptations whispered by the dragons and foolishly rejected the king of the mountain. While the seeds of pride sown by the dragons destroyed whole nations, there was always a remnant of faithful folk who loved the king and refused to turn away from him. The dragons trained their eyes upon each succeeding generation for any sign of the biggest threat of all, the prince. They listened to the many prophecies for clues and watched for any sign of his coming. So when their seed corrupted a key scribe who knew well the prophecies and signs, the dragon horde commanded he tell them all. The scribe, whose hatred grew against the king, was only too happy to oblige. Until finally, "The time has come," Lord Dragon shouted to the horde. "We've scoured the land for the promised child without success. Up till now, we've been guessing blindly, but no more. Pay attention, my friends," Lord Dragon shouted. "Bring in the scribe." Out from the darkness of the surrounding wilderness, a frail old man appeared, hunched over, his robes ragged and torn. He held a scroll under his arm. Lord Dragon looked down at the approaching man, who cowered in fear as he drew near the ominous, shadowy dragon. The Dragon Lord ushered his command. "Open the scroll," he commanded. The scribe wasted no time obeying. He unrolled the scroll on the ground in the center of the dragons and held it open with 2 rocks at either end. Gold leaf and colorful filigree designs decorated the text. Once the scroll was fully open, the man looked up and spoke. "Have you ever seen a more beautiful scroll?" "I think not," he said, answering his own question as he admired his handiwork. "I worked as a scribe, charged to copy the ancient prophecies. My scrolls were the most beautiful of all. Everyone admired my work and celebrated their beauty. But when upon the scroll I made a simple copy error, the lead scribe ordered it destroyed. For by the king's edict, no mistakes could ever be allowed. If truth were known, I did not make a mistake. I added my signature to the line of the scroll. The words I copied were perfect. 6 letters more that spelled out my name. I knew that future scribes would copy it forever after me. My name would live on." The dragons howled to hear him boast. They could see how the scribe was consumed with dragon seed. The man could not resist and was theirs to command. "Show us the prophecy," the dragon lord commanded. The scribe slapped his palm down upon the scroll and pointed to a line. "Hear now the prophecy of the king," he said with a deep, sober tone of voice that caused the dragons to shrink back in fear. It was the word prophecy that caused them to shiver. For the dragons knew the king's prophecies always came true, and they worried what the scribes would reveal. The man pointed to a line of the scroll and translated one word at a time as he read. "The lowlanders who have walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a forest of deep darkness, on them light of the mountain has shone." The word light concerned the dragon horde, but the rest of the prophecy simply terrified them. "For to the lowlanders a child is born, a son is given as a gift, and the government of all the land below the mountain shall be upon his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful, Mighty, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to his rule, and he will sit upon the throne of his fathers from now and for all eternity. The zeal of the king of the mountain will do this." The dragon horde shrunk back, silenced by the prophecy. The lesser dragons didn't understand all the meaning, but even they were clever enough to know that it was terrible news. Lord Dragon thrust down his wings and rose high over the horde to begin his address. "Do not be concerned or think this prophecy will stand. The king has made a grave mistake in speaking his plan through the prophets. Now that we have this word, we will use it against him for our own advantage to victory." The dragon horde listened attentively to their leader speak, but remained unconvinced that victory was anywhere close at hand. Lord Dragon continued, hoping to rekindle enthusiasm within the dragon ranks. "In our efforts to exact revenge upon the throne, we've lost our focus. We have become distracted with trying to destroy the entire race of human men when we need to kill only one child." Killing one child was easy, but which child? That one thought filled the minds of the dragons. This is the meaning of the prophecy. It says a son to be born, who the prophets called both Father and Prince of Peace. Listen carefully. The king plans to send his very own son, the prince, into the lowlands as a man. Hear what I say. If we kill the king's son, we destroy the king, and his spirit forever dies. For the king, the prince, and the spirit are inseparably linked as one. We thought our battle was against the king atop the mountain, but once the son is born, our battle will be fought here, in the lowlands. You will be my scouts. We will sow the dragon seeds of pride across the land, and when the prince is born as a man-child, we will destroy him. The prophecy will be broken, and the light of heaven will turn dark. The dragon lord's explanation excited the horde and fed their desire for revenge. Their shouts of approval grew louder. Lord Dragon raised his voice above the growing clamor and shouted, "Then we will rule the world from that time forth and forevermore. This is my prophecy." The dragon horde shouted their approval. Lord Dragon held up his hands to silence their celebration and spoke out again. "We need not scour all the far-off cities and lands, for the prophecy is clear. The prince will sit upon the throne of kings of old. That means he will be born in the royal line of the kings of man. While there are many tribes across the lowlands, the royal clan is not so large and built their cities in a pocket of land at the base of the mountain. What is more, I believe the king will send the prince into the lowlands with proper recognition. As sure as I stand before you, the prince will be born to royal fanfare somewhere in a palace. So, my dragons, fly at once and guard the palace and every royal home. Sow your seed among the scribes and religious rulers of the land. When you discover the royal baby, get word back to me, and I will crush his head." The dragons howled at the thought and beat their fists upon their chests, knowing the prophecy ahead of time was key. Soon they would destroy the child. Then they would rule the mountain, caught up in their celebration and intoxicated by their pride. Not a single dragon noticed the bright light that flashed in the western sky above the fields surrounding the city of the giant slayer. Nick paused his reading for a moment, surprised at how long it had pulled him in. By now the smell of mac and cheese was overpowering, and he rose to cautiously head down to the kitchen, stomach growling. Okay, one last question and we can be finished studying, Martha said, flipping up the final card. See if you can get it. Question. What do you call a prolonged speech designed to delay an action in the Senate, often referred to as Rule 22? I know, Maya shouted, waving her hand in the air. Wait, give me a minute to remember the picture. Philip was so glad to see Nate that he talked and talked with him as the bus turned down Route 22. The answer? Filibuster. The answer is filibuster. Good. Where do they use a filibuster? Martha further questioned Mia. So glad to see Nate. Senate! They use the filibuster in the Senate, Maya shouted again. What does a filibuster involve? Talk and talk and talk. She couldn't believe she was getting the answers to the questions correct. Great job, Maya! See how easy it is to remember a word picture? Martha leaned back triumphantly. Maya seemed to really be enjoying her company while they studied. Maybe she wasn't hiding the content of the text. Perhaps she was afraid to let on she had a phone. But Martha wanted to know for sure, and she had a plan. Let's stop for now, Martha suggested. I know I need a break. Is your restroom just down the hall safe? I'd use the downstairs bathroom, Maya answered quickly, seeing her chance to get Martha out of the way for a few minutes. Sending her down to the bathroom would give her time to check her phone, which had buzzed several times while they worked their way through the thick stack of flashcards. My brother uses the one up here. It's not safe. Okay, thanks for the warning. I'll go downstairs. Martha stood up, opened the bedroom door, and walked into the hall. But instead of walking downstairs, she waited by the closed door. After a moment, she heard Maya's phone buzz again. Perfect, Martha thought. In a moment, she would be able to find out what was really going on.